So today Canon announced the release of its newest full-frame R-series mirrorless camera, the R6 Mark II. And as a longtime user of the original Canon R6, I wanted to just kind of share some of my thoughts on this new upgraded body and honestly just answer the question, is this camera right for me? Is this camera right for you? And kind of like, where do I feel like this camera fits in the overall Canon lineup? So let's chat about a few things that are different. The first thing that you obviously see is 24 megapixels. That is a bump from the original 20 megapixels that was found on the R6. While 4 megapixels is not going to make a massive difference in image quality and resolution, it's a nice little bump. So if you're in the market for a little bit higher resolution than the R6 Mark II might be a great camera for you. A place where there has been a massive bump is when you're shooting with the electronic shutter. Instead of the mechanical shutter, the R6 Mark II can shoot at 40 frames per second versus the 20 frames per second found in the R6. So this is going to be super applicable for sports photographers, action photographers, even wildlife if you're trying to capture a very, very quickly moving animal, wedding photographers when you're trying to capture very quickly moving people or moments or things where you might want to just capture a ton of frames very quickly. This camera is going to be great for that versus the 20 frames per second found in the R6. Personally, I don't feel like I need any more than about 12 to 15. And so 40 is a little bit overkill for me. But again, if you're in that sports or action field, 40 is going to be very, very appreciated. Another huge thing that has changed on the R6 Mark II versus the original R6 is that when you're shooting video, the video time recording limit has been removed effectively from the R6 Mark II. I still believe there's a recording limit when you're shooting 4K 60, but if you're shooting 4K 30, there is no time limit, which is going to be super helpful for like docu-style interviews, recording people talking and that kind of thing. If you're shooting events, there's a time limit on the R6 and there's not a time limit on the R6 Mark II when you're shooting in like 4K 30. Another thing to mention from the video standpoint is that while the R6 and the R6 Mark II both technically shoot at the same resolution, they both have 1080p and 4K work environments. The R6 Mark II can also shoot 6K RAW when connected to an external recorder, and because of that 6K sensor, the 4K footage in the R6 Mark II is actually oversampled 6K footage. And so while the resolution is still going to be at 4K, it's actually shooting and kind of downsizing from a 6K sensor, which is going to just translate into a little bit sharper footage, a little bit cleaner footage compared to the 4K footage you might see in the R6. Now, is it going to be a massive difference? I don't think so. But again, those little feature bumps are appreciated. Another thing worth noting on the R6 Mark II versus the R6 is that the R6, when you're shooting in 1080p, can shoot up to a maximum frame rate of 120 frames per second. The R6 Mark II, that bumps all the way up to 180 frames per second. Again, personally for me, I don't shoot in 1080p anymore, but if you're shooting in 1080p, that option to go to 180 frames per second could be very, very helpful if you're trying to shoot slow motion content in 1080p. So another place where there's been some upgrades from the R6 to the R6 Mark II is the autofocus. Reading from the actual website, it says horses, trains, and airplanes are newly detectable. So I don't know if that's something that's going to come out on a firmware update for the R6, or if it's literally that's just something that's on the R6 Mark II. But if you're looking to detect horses, planes, trains, those kind of things, apparently the R6 Mark II has some features to detect those things specifically. Also, I did find this thing on the website that said additional control is now available for detecting the subject's left or right eye, which can be programmed to a custom button, making it easy to focus on the preferred eye in the moment. I don't know if this is the similar thing as what the R6 and the R3 and the R5 have, where you can just kind of like toggle over using the little thumb switch in the back, or if this is a specific control that you can say switch eyes, switch eyes. Again, I'd have to test that hands-on to see what that actually looks like, but it looks like there is some decently significant autofocus improvements on the R6 Mark II versus the R6 Mark I. Another major thing to think about when considering the R6 Mark II is that they have actually added a new toggle to switch between photo and video. So if any of you have shot with Canon DSLRs, the 6D Mark II, 5D Mark IV, 1DX series, you'll remember that back in the day we had this little toggle where we could switch back and forth between photo and video with just a little switch. That was super, super convenient for hybrid shooters who were shooting photo and video to immediately be able to switch from shooting stills. One click over, you're shooting in video. Unfortunately, they removed that on the R6 and the R5. They brought it back in the R3, which was super, super convenient for someone like me who is a hybrid photo video shooter. And on the new R6 Mark II, they've actually swapped the power button from the original R6. Now this power button is actually a photo and video toggle. Honestly, for me, that's a huge thing. If you're shooting hybrid photo and video, I think that's super, super helpful. And just shows that this camera was designed for hybrid photo video shooters versus the R6, which was probably more intended for a photo environment with the ability to also capture some video if you wanted to. And speaking of video capabilities, there's a few very nice like video specific features that Canon's brought over kind of from their cinema camera line that will make this camera so much better for videographers specifically. One thing they brought into the R6 Mark II is some enhanced focus breathing correction. Focus breathing is that kind of like weird pulsing that happens when you focus on something close and then something far away, and it can kind of give you this effect of like you're zooming in or out a little bit. They've also brought some really helpful exposure controls, specifically some false color overlays and some zebra patterns that'll help you really nail the exposure and make sure that you're getting the correct exposure in camera. So that's super helpful for video shooters as well. And they've also mentioned that they've increased the battery life or kind of increased the battery performance in the camera just to help this camera shoot for longer, which again, from a video standpoint and from a photo standpoint is always helpful. So wrapping up, who is this camera for and should you buy the R6 Mark II? So I think if you're coming from an R6 already, unless you're shooting a ton of photo and video together, and even if you are, I don't know if the R6 Mark II is worth the upgrade from the R6. Now, if your primary camera body is the R3 or the R5 and you're looking for a backup camera, the R6 Mark II is great for that. It's gonna have some fantastic stills capability, some great video capability, the ability to switch back and forth between the two very quickly, and honestly even quicker than the R5 would be able to. And so I think as a backup camera for the R3 or the R5, the R6 Mark II would be fantastic. Also, if you're a wedding photographer and you just want really great stills capability, great autofocus, and you're not looking for ultra high resolution like the R5, but also not looking to spend the price tag of the R3, the R6 Mark II is a perfect camera for a wedding photographer or for a YouTuber who's looking to shoot some running gun video, doesn't need crazy pro features on the video front, but just something to capture high quality, consistent video content for posting online. The R6 Mark II is gonna be great for that. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the R6 Mark II and kind of where I feel it sits in the Canon range. This is a camera I probably will not be buying personally, but I think it's a great camera and I think it has some great features. Let me know in the comments what you think, if you're gonna be buying this camera, if you're gonna be upgrading to this camera, or honestly, if you've used it, tell me your thoughts. Would love to hear your actual hands-on experience with it. Yeah, so that's it for today. Thanks so much. See you in the next video.